There is a version of you that hasn't been born yet. Not born in the way a child is born, but born the way a mountain is revealed when the fog finally lifts. It was always there. You just couldn't see the shape of it yet. Think for a moment about who you were 5 years ago. The things that terrified you then. The arguments you were certain you'd win. The version of happiness you thought you needed. If that person could sit across from you right now, would they even recognize your eyes? Would they understand the calm you carry, or would it look, to them, like a language they never learned? This is the strange arithmetic of a human life. We are not one fixed person moving through time. We are a sequence of selves, each one dissolving quietly into the next. So quietly that most people never notice the handoff. One day you simply realize, the person who used to lie awake, replaying every mistake, is gone. Someone new answered the phone. But here is the part no one tells you. That transformation was not an accident. It was not luck. And it was not simply time healing things, the way people say so easily, so carelessly, as if time does the work for you while you sleep. Time does not build character. Time only provides the room. What happens inside that room? That is entirely a different matter. Somewhere inside you right now, there is a self waiting. Not a fantasy version of you, not some flawless, untouchable figure, but a steadier one, a quieter one who has stopped negotiating with their own fear. And the strange truth is this, that self is not ahead of you on some distant road. It is not waiting at a finish line you haven't reached yet. It is underneath, beneath the noise, beneath the roles you play just to get through a Tuesday, beneath the versions of yourself you built only to be accepted by people who never truly saw you. Today, we are not going to talk about becoming someone new. We are going to talk about uncovering someone who was buried. Let us begin with a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What do you do when no one is watching? Not the version of you that shows up polished for meetings, or patient for family, or charming for strangers. The other one. The one who exists in the 15 minutes between waking up and deciding whether today matters. The one who chooses, in private, whether to keep a promise that only you will ever know was broken. That 15 minutes, that quiet, unwitnessed moment, is where an entire life is built. Or slowly, invisibly, dismantled. Discipline is not what people think it is. It has been dressed up, over the years, as something loud, something aggressive. Cold showers, alarms at 4 in the morning, gritted teeth and forced smiles. But real discipline, the kind that survives decades, the kind that doesn't collapse the first time life gets difficult. Real discipline is quiet. It looks almost boring from the outside. It is the architecture no one applauds, because architecture is only noticed when it fails. Think of a riverbed. The river gets all the attention, doesn't it? People stand at its edge and admire the current, the movement, the sound of water finding its way over stone. But the riverbed, the ground beneath, that is the thing giving the water its direction. Without it, there is no river. There is only a flood, spreading in every direction, going nowhere, drowning everything in its path, because it has no shape to follow. Your discipline is the riverbed of your life. It does not need to be admired. It only needs to hold its shape long enough for something powerful to move through it without destroying everything around it. And here is what almost no one says clearly enough. Discipline was never meant to punish you. Somewhere along the way, a strange lie took root in the modern mind. The idea that self-control must feel like war, that growth must hurt in order to count. That if a habit feels natural, it isn't real transformation. This is not true. The deepest discipline in a human life often feels less like fighting and more like remembering. Remembering who you decided to become in a quiet moment before the world had the chance to talk you out of it. Now let us speak honestly about weakness, because most people carry a wound around this word that was never properly examined. Somewhere in childhood, or in a harsh classroom, or in a household where love had conditions attached to it, many of us learned that weakness was something to hide, something shameful, a crack to be covered before anyone could see it and use it against us. And so we built walls, not out of strength, but out of fear disguised as strength. We called it toughness. We called it not needing anyone. We wore it like armor and told ourselves it made us powerful. But armor, if you wear it long enough, stops protecting you and starts imprisoning you. Weakness, understood correctly, is not a flaw in your character. It is information. It is the part of you that is still asking to be understood. When your hands shake before a difficult conversation, that is not failure. That is your nervous system telling you this moment matters. When you feel the pull to give up in the middle of something hard, that is not proof you are broken. It is proof you are human, standing exactly where transformation always happens, at the edge of what is comfortable. The people who seem unshakable, the ones who appear to move through life with quiet strength, they did not get there by eliminating their weakness. They got there by finally turning to face it, instead of running from it their entire lives. Imagine, for a moment, a locked room inside a house you've lived in for years. You know it's there. You walk past it every single day. But you've convinced yourself it's easier to simply never open the door. Easier to build your whole life around avoiding one room. That is what unexamined weakness becomes. Not a flaw, but a locked door you carry with you everywhere, spending enormous energy simply making sure no one, including yourself, ever looks inside. Real strength is not the absence of that room. Real strength is finally turning the handle. And this brings us to something far more dangerous than weakness itself. Something that has quietly become one of the great psychological crises of our time: distraction. We live in an age that has perfected the art of helping you escape yourself. Every device in your pocket, every notification, every infinite scroll, they were not built by accident. They were built, quite deliberately, to interrupt the one thing a human being needs most in order to grow: stillness. Because stillness is where truth lives. And many of us, without ever admitting it consciously, have organized our entire lives around avoiding that meeting. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable silence can feel? Not the silence of a peaceful morning, but the silence that arrives when you're alone with your own thoughts for longer than a few minutes. No phone, no noise, just you, and whatever has been quietly waiting beneath the surface of your busy schedule. Most people reach for a distraction before that silence has the chance to say anything. But distraction does not remove what you're avoiding. It only delays the conversation. And debts of the mind, like debts of money, tend to accumulate interest. The longer you avoid an unresolved fear, an unspoken grief, a decision you know you need to make, the heavier it becomes, waiting there in the dark, growing larger simply because it has never been brought into the light and looked at honestly. Picture a small ember left alone in a fireplace long after everyone has gone to bed. It looks harmless, small, easy to ignore, but leave it long enough, feed it just enough oxygen through neglect, and it can quietly become something that reshapes an entire house. Your unexamined thoughts behave the same way. What you refuse to look at directly does not disappear. It simply waits for a moment when you are tired, or vulnerable, or alone, and then it reshapes your mood, your decisions, your relationships, without you ever understanding why. This is why mental control, true command over your own attention, has become one of the rarest and most valuable skills a person can develop. Not control in the sense of suppression, not shoving feelings down and pretending they don't exist. That is not control. That is postponement. And postponement always collects its debt eventually. True, mental control is the ability to notice where your mind has wandered and gently, without cruelty toward yourself, bring it back to what actually matters. It is a muscle. Like any muscle, it is weak the first time you try to use it deliberately. Your attention will wander. You will catch yourself mid-scroll, mid-worry, mid-argument you're having in your head with someone who isn't even in the room. And each time you notice this and choose to return, that return is the exercise. That is the entire practice. There is an old but useful way to picture this. Imagine your mind as a wide open field, and your thoughts as a herd of horses running freely across it, in every direction, with no rider. For most of your life, you may have believed this chaos was simply how minds work, that your attention was meant to be pulled endlessly from one impulse to the next. But a mind with discipline is not a mind with no horses. It is a mind with a rider, someone who does not try to stop the horses from existing, because that would be impossible and exhausting, but who learns, slowly, patiently, to guide them, to choose direction, to decide, moment by moment, where this enormous natural energy will actually go. This is the quiet war very few people ever speak about honestly. The war between the part of you that wants comfort in this instant and the part of you that wants meaning across a lifetime. This is your inner struggle, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is, in fact, proof that you are alive in the fullest sense. A person with no inner conflict is either a person who has stopped growing or a person who has stopped being honest with themselves. Conflict, uncomfortable as it feels, is the friction of a mind that still cares about becoming something more than it currently is. There will be moments, quiet ones, usually late at night or early in the morning, when you feel two versions of yourself pulling in opposite directions. One voice tells you to stay where it's safe, to keep the familiar version of your life, even if it no longer fits who you're becoming. The other voice, quieter, harder to hear beneath years of noise, tells you that growth is waiting, but it requires you to release something you've been holding on to out of fear, not love. Most people spend their entire lives silencing that second voice, because listening to it is uncomfortable, and comfort has been mistaken in this era for happiness. But comfort and happiness are not the same thing. A person can be comfortable and deeply unfulfilled. A person can be comfortable and slowly disappearing beneath a life they never actually chose, only inherited from fear, from habit, from what was expected of them by people who meant well, but never asked what they truly wanted. Discipline, weakness, distraction, mental control, inner struggle. These are not 5 separate topics. They are 5 threads of the same rope. The rope you are quietly, patiently, sometimes painfully weaving moment by moment, decision by decision, into the shape of the person you are becoming. And the truth is, you have already begun. You began the moment you stopped scrolling long enough to sit with something real. You began the moment you asked yourself a question you didn't immediately have the answer to. That beginning does not need applause. It does not need to be announced to anyone. It only needs to continue. There comes a moment, if you are honest enough with yourself, when you realize that becoming someone new is not about adding things. It is not about collecting more discipline, more knowledge, more achievements to stack on top of who you already are, like bricks laid on a foundation that was never actually examined. Transformation, real transformation, works the opposite way. It is a process of removal, of setting things down, of finally admitting that some of the weight you've been carrying for years was never yours to carry in the first place. Picture a sculptor standing before a block of stone. To someone untrained, it looks as though the sculptor is creating something from nothing, shaping a figure out of raw material through sheer will. But ask any sculptor, and they will tell you something far more interesting. The figure was already there, inside the stone, the entire time. Their work was never creation. It was removal. Every strike of the chisel was not adding a person into existence. It was taking away everything that wasn't them. This is closer to the truth of who you are becoming. You are not manufacturing a better version of yourself out of thin air. You are chiseling away the parts that were never truly you to begin with. The fears you adopted because someone else was afraid. The beliefs you inherited because questioning them felt too dangerous at the time. The smallness you accepted because it kept the peace in rooms that were never going to make space for your growth anyway. Self-mastery begins the day you stop asking, "What more do I need to become this person?" and start asking, "What have I been carrying that was never mine?" This shift changes everything, because it means the person you are trying to reach is not far away, waiting at the end of some impossible journey. They are close, closer than you think, buried under habits of self-protection that made sense once, in a different chapter of your life, but no longer serve the chapter you are writing now. Let us speak now about purpose, because it has become one of the most misunderstood words of this generation. Many people wait for purpose to arrive the way weather arrives, suddenly, dramatically, unmistakably. They imagine a single moment of clarity, a lightning strike of certainty, after which they will simply know, beyond any doubt, exactly what they were meant to do with their life. For most people, that moment never comes, and so they wait. And the waiting itself becomes a quiet form of suffering, because life does not pause while you wait for permission to begin. Purpose is not a destination you discover. It is a direction you choose, and then prove true through your actions, day after day, long after the initial excitement of choosing it has faded. Think of someone walking through a thick forest at night, with no map, only a small light in their hand. They cannot see the whole path. They cannot see where the forest ends or what lies beyond the tree line. But they can see the next few steps in front of them, illuminated just enough to move forward without falling. That is what purpose actually looks like, most of the time. Not a grand vision revealed all at once, but a willingness to take the next visible step, even when the rest of the path remains hidden in darkness. People who seem to live with deep purpose are rarely people who saw the whole forest before they started walking. They are simply people who kept moving, one small illuminated step at a time, refusing to stand still simply because the darkness ahead felt uncertain. And this requires something modern life has quietly stolen from almost everyone: silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Space where a thought can finish itself before being interrupted. Space where a feeling can be felt fully, instead of numbed the moment it becomes uncomfortable. Space where you can hear, without distortion, the difference between what you actually want and what you have simply been told to want by everyone around you. Consider how rare true silence has become. Even in moments meant for rest, there is noise. A screen glowing in a dark room, a voice in your ear while you walk, music filling every car ride, every quiet errand, every pause that might otherwise have allowed something honest to surface. This is not an accident of modern life. It is, in many ways, the defining feature of it. An entire economy has been built on making sure you are never alone with your own mind for very long. Because a mind left alone eventually starts asking difficult questions. Questions about whether the life you're living was actually chosen, or simply absorbed. Silence is where those questions finally get room to breathe. And here is something important to understand about the part of you that lives beneath conscious thought. The part shaped by everything you've experienced, but rarely examined directly. This unconscious layer of your mind is not your enemy. It has been portrayed sometimes as something dark and dangerous, a place best avoided. But this is a misunderstanding. Think of the unconscious, less like a monster in the basement, and more like an old library in a house you inherited but never fully explored. Some of the books on those shelves are painful to read. Old wounds, old fears, memories you'd rather leave closed. But other books in that same library are filled with strength you didn't know you had. Instincts that have protected you more times than you realize. Wisdom, gathered not from what you were taught, but from what you have lived through and survived. You cannot integrate what you refuse to examine. And so much of what people call not knowing themselves is simply this: a lifetime avoiding a library that holds both their deepest wounds and their deepest resources, because they were taught somewhere along the way that opening that door was too frightening to attempt. But avoidance does not make a library disappear. It only means you keep living your life without access to half of what's inside it. This brings us, finally, to the part of you that exists beneath every role you've ever played. You have likely spent years perfecting different versions of yourself for different rooms. The version that performs well at work. The version that keeps family gatherings peaceful. The version that seems fine even when it isn't, because falling apart in front of others has never felt safe. These versions are not lies, exactly. They are more like different coats, worn depending on the weather of a particular room. But underneath every coat, there is still a body, a person. Something constant that does not change no matter which room you're standing in. This deeper self is not the same as the roles you play to be accepted. It is quieter than all of them, and often, tragically, it is the voice most people hear the least, because it does not shout. It does not demand attention the way fear does, or the way the desire for approval does. It simply waits, patiently, for the moments when you are finally still enough to listen. Becoming whole does not mean the different coats you wear for different rooms. Some of them are necessary. Some of them are even kind. softening you in situations that would otherwise be unnecessarily harsh. Becoming whole means no longer forgetting, underneath all of them, who you are without any coat at all. This is where inner freedom actually begins, not in circumstances changing, not in escaping every difficulty life presents, but in no longer needing every room you enter to define who you are. Picture someone standing at the edge of the ocean during a storm. The waves are enormous, unpredictable, loud enough to drown out every other sound. From a distance, it looks like chaos has completely taken over. But beneath the surface, only a few meters down, the ocean is calm, undisturbed. The storm exists only near the surface, where wind meets water, where external forces are strongest. Your circumstances are the storm on the surface. But there is a depth within you, if you are willing to descend into it, through stillness and honest self-reflection, where the noise of daily life cannot fully reach. This is not a place you escape to, in order to avoid your life. It is a place you return to, so that you can face your life without being controlled entirely by its surface-level chaos. Control of the mind, real control, is not the ability to stop the storm from happening. Storms are simply part of being alive. Real control is the ability to remember, even in the middle of the storm, that there is a calmer place within you, that the wind was never able to reach. Now let us return to where we began. Somewhere, right now, there is a version of you still waiting. Not a fantasy, not an idealized image built from comparison to other people's lives. Something quieter and more honest than that. A version of you shaped by everything you've survived, everything you've questioned, every uncomfortable truth you've finally stopped running from. That version of you is not ahead of you on some distant road you haven't found yet. It has been walking beside you this entire time, patiently, through every difficult year, every version of yourself you had to outgrow, every room you wore a different coat into simply to survive. And here is the final truth, the one worth carrying with you long after this moment ends. You do not become a stronger person by becoming someone entirely different from who you are. You become a stronger person by finally becoming honest with who you have always been, underneath the noise, underneath the fear, underneath every distraction the world offered you instead of stillness. Your past self could not imagine who you are becoming, not because this version of you is a stranger, but because your past self had not yet done the quiet, unglamorous work of removing everything that wasn't truly you. That work continues. It does not end with a single speech, a single realization, a single moment of clarity late at night. It continues tomorrow morning, in the 15 minutes when no one is watching. It continues the next time silence arrives, and you choose to sit with it, instead of reaching for a distraction. It continues the next time fear speaks first, and you answer anyway. You are not waiting to become someone new. You are simply, finally, remembering who you already were, beneath everything that was never truly yours to carry, and that, quietly, without needing applause from anyone, is enough.